Avery Monroe never imagined her life would shatter under the golden lights of Beverly Hills. That night, the rooftop of the Hyatt Sky Lounge glittered like it was suspended above the world. Los Angeles glowing beneath her heels, every breath steeped in champagne and music. She was just a backstage model, exhausted after a 12-hour fashion show, still wearing the last swipe of silver eyeliner. She only wanted a quiet corner to breathe. But fate sent her something else. Dominic Hale, yes, that Dominic, had stepped away from the VIP crowd to escape reporters. Everyone knew him, the American golden boy of fintech, the man who climbed from a broken trailer home to a Park Avenue penthouse. His name flashed everywhere that year: magazines, billboards, financial news. Avery expected arrogance, the kind that sticks in the air like expensive cologne. But instead, he looked tired, human, alone. He asked if she was cold, shrugging off his tailored jacket for her. She refused, but he draped it over her shoulders anyway, half smiling as if the gesture surprised even him. They talked. About childhood scars, about growing up invisible, about proving themselves to a world that expected nothing. For the first time in years, Avery felt seen. One drink became 2, then 3, then a conversation so gentle she forgot how harsh the world had been to her. Dominic listened, really listened, as she admitted she'd grown up in Kansas without a father and worked 3 jobs before modeling. He told her he knew that kind of hunger, the hunger that never truly left. And then, that secret night happened. A night that felt too tender, too honest to be real. But the morning after was colder than the marble floors of his suite. Dominic didn't meet her eyes. His phone vibrated nonstop. Investors, deals, Valeria Knox blowing up his screen. He barely said goodbye before disappearing behind a silver elevator door, leaving Avery standing in his oversized white shirt, realizing the fairy tale had ended before breakfast. She returned to her tiny rented room that afternoon, folding his jacket like a keepsake she didn't want to need. She tried convincing herself it was nothing. Just a night. Just a moment of borrowed magic. But life doesn't let go that easily. 3 weeks later, the world tilted again. A faint blue line on a pregnancy test, then another, then another. Avery felt her knees buckle, her breath vanish, her heart slam into panic. With shaking hands, she dialed Dominic. He answered on the 4th ring, voice cold, rushed, irritated. She whispered the truth. "Dominic, I'm pregnant." Silence. A long, deadly silence. Then he spoke words that would haunt her for years. "Don't call me again. Handle it. I don't care how." Avery felt something inside her crack wide open, and she had no idea that wasn't the worst of it. Because that very night, someone slid an envelope under her door. An NDA, a threat, and a warning. And inside the envelope was a photo of her leaving Dominic's suite. Someone had been watching her all along. Avery Monroe had always been the kind of girl life tried to break early. Long before the night Dominic Hale shattered her world, she had already learned how to survive storms without an umbrella. Born in a fading Kansas town where the diner closed before sunset and the only grocery store shut down twice a week, she grew up in a rented trailer with a mother who worked herself into exhaustion just to keep the lights on. Avery never knew her father. Not his voice, not his smile, not even his name. All she had was a single photograph her mother kept hidden in a shoebox. A photograph Avery didn't dare look at too often because it made the hole in her heart feel wider. When her mother passed away from a sudden stroke when Avery was 17, she packed everything she owned in 2 suitcases and took the first bus to Los Angeles. She didn't have a roadmap to success. She barely had money for food. But she had a dream and a stubbornness that refused to die. She worked night shifts at a cheap diner on Sunset Boulevard, balancing plates with blistered hands while memorizing model casting calls on her cracked iPhone screen. She slept 5 hours a night, drank instant coffee in the mornings, and fought the city every single day. People didn't see her struggle. They saw the tall girl with green eyes and the face photographers loved. But they didn't know the price she paid to keep that world within reach. The agency she signed with locked her in a brutal contract, charging ridiculous fees for training, portfolio updates, and image consulting. Every month she ended up deeper in debt. When she tried to complain, they warned her she should be grateful. And still, Avery pushed forward. By the time she was 23, she had climbed from waitress to mid-tier model. Not famous, not secure but surviving. Just enough to pay rent for a shoebox apartment with peeling paint and hear the city through thin walls. Just enough to feel like maybe, just maybe, she could build a future better than the one she was born into. But all it took was a single night to flip her world upside down. After the pregnancy test, things spiraled quickly. The NDA that arrived under her door sent panic rushing through her veins. She wasn't naive. Avery knew powerful men like to hide their mistakes. But Dominic Hale? She'd believed he was different. Their conversation had felt so painfully real, so disarmingly human. Now she saw the truth. She had been nothing but a liability to him. The pressure from his legal team grew fast. Emails with cold language, calls from unknown numbers. Her agency suddenly canceled 2 of her biggest shoots, citing unprofessional behavior. Someone leaked an edited audio clip online that made her sound like she was trying to trap Dominic for money. And Avery? She didn't even have enough money for a lawyer. She tried to disappear from the industry quietly, but paparazzi showed up outside her apartment one morning, shouting ugly questions about the CEO's secret mistress. Her landlord, terrified of the chaos, taped a notice to her door. If she caused public disruption again, he'd evict her. Everywhere she turned, the world closed in. But the worst part was at night, when she lay in bed with her hand on her stomach, whispering apologies to the tiny life growing inside her, promising she would protect it even if she had nothing left. She didn't know it yet, but forces far bigger than Dominic Hale were moving in the shadows, watching her, waiting for the right moment. And someone with a name she never expected to hear, was about to walk back into her life. And when he did, Avery's world would change forever. New York City wasn't a place people simply lived in. It was a place that swallowed them whole or remade them into something unrecognizable. When Avery Monroe stepped off the budget flight from Los Angeles with a backpack, 1 suitcase, and a pregnancy she still hadn't fully processed, she didn't feel hopeful. She felt hunted. The air outside LaGuardia was cold enough to sting her cheeks. Yellow cabs lined up like impatient soldiers, horns blaring, headlights cutting through the winter fog. Mason wasn't born yet, but Avery already held her stomach protectively, as if the city might bump into her too hard and shatter what little she had left. She found a tiny sublet room in Queens, barely big enough for a mattress and a chipped dresser. The window overlooked a brick wall, and the heater rattled at night like it was taking its last breath. But it was quiet, anonymous, safe, at least for a moment. Her world became a daily loop of survival, waking at dawn, drinking watered-down coffee, taking the subway with its metallic groans and flickering lights, and working as a cashier in a crowded grocery store, just to save enough for doctor visits. With every passing month, Avery grew more tired, but she also grew more determined. New York had a way of forcing you to choose, either break or harden. Meanwhile, across the river, Dominic Hale lived in a different universe. His glass tower on Park Avenue rose into the skyline like a polished blade. The Hale Corp logo gleamed against the clouds, the kind of building designed to intimidate. Every floor smelled of cologne, marble polish, and money. Conference rooms overlooked Central Park, where joggers moved like tiny ants below. Dominic's penthouse, a fortress of black marble and floor-to-ceiling views, floated above Manhattan as if the city existed only to serve him. And Avery? She was a ghost in his world, a mistake, a threat he needed to erase quietly. But New York had a way of pushing paths together whether people wanted it or not. One late December night, Avery stood outside the grocery store after closing, snow beginning to fall in slow, heavy flakes. Her breath fogged the air as she waited for the bus that always arrived late. She felt the weight of exhaustion deep in her bones. Her manager had cut her hours to make room for holiday staff, which meant less money for rent, and she was already behind by a week. She pulled her thin coat tighter, her fingers numb. A large black SUV slowed near the curb, headlights shining directly at her. Avery stiffened, fear racing through her chest. She'd seen enough of Dominic's tactics to know intimidation when it hovered in front of her. The window rolled down. But it wasn't Dominic. It was a stranger, or so she thought. The man behind the wheel had sharp, serious eyes and a tired gentleness beneath them. He looked at her like he recognized her. Avery's heart pounded. She stepped back, ready to run if she had to. "You shouldn't be standing out here alone," he said calmly. "It's late." and freezing. She swallowed. "I'm fine." He hesitated. "Do you remember me?" Avery frowned, shaking her head. "You helped me once," he continued quietly. 3 years ago, outside the Sunset Diner. Your car had a flat tire. I gave you my jacket while I changed it for you." Her breath caught. That night, she remembered the kindness, the warmth, the unexpected softness of a stranger who asked nothing in return. And now he was here in New York, looking at her like fate wasn't done with her yet. "My name is Ethan Ward," he said. "And Avery, you're in danger, more than you know." And that was the moment Avery's quiet life in Queens began to unravel. Dominic Hale was the kind of man America loved to worship, until they discovered the truth. On magazine covers, he looked unstoppable, sharp jawline, custom suits, the posture of someone who believed the world owed him admiration. His company, Hale Corp., was the new Wall Street darling, a fintech empire claiming to rebuild trust in American banking. Investors adored him, politicians praised him, tech media named him the face of modern resilience. But none of them knew the real Dominic. The real man was built on secrets, ugly, desperate ones. 10 years earlier, when his startup was dying, he committed a fraud so quiet and so buried that even his co-founders didn't know the full truth. If exposed, it would destroy everything he had built. So Dominic taught himself one rule: eliminate every threat before it grows teeth. Avery Monroe had become that threat. The moment she told him she was pregnant, he went into survival mode. Not emotional, strategic. He immediately contacted Hale Corp's legal team, requesting a containment plan. He ordered a background search on her, demanded access to old photos, social media accounts, anything that could discredit her before she even considered going public. His team complied with brutal efficiency. They dug up the fact she'd grown up poor, worked late shifts, lived in cheap apartments. They twisted these truths into a narrative of instability. One lawyer suggested leaking to blogs that Avery had mental health episodes due to stress. Dominic didn't argue. He approved it. Then came Valeria Knox, his glamorous influencer girlfriend who thrived on chaos. When Dominic told her about Avery, Valeria's jealousy and ambition collided into something toxic. "She's nobody," Valeria said, tossing her platinum blonde curls over her shoulder as she scrolled through Avery's photos. "But if people think you slept with a nobody, that hurts us both. She needs to disappear." Dominic didn't say yes. He didn't say no. He simply looked at Valeria, tired and annoyed, and she knew that was enough permission. Valeria found a paparazzi contact who owed her a favor. She paid him to follow Avery for a week, collect photos, track her routine. She also hired someone to manipulate audio clips from Avery's social media voice messages, stitching them into a fake recording that sounded like Avery demanding money from Dominic. Once crafted, the clip was sent anonymously to a gossip account. Within days, Avery's name began circulating in whispers through the modeling industry. Drama magnet. Trying to trap a CEO. Recorded blackmail audio. Careful, she's dangerous. Dominic pretended not to know anything. He even acted offended when his PR manager mentioned the rumor, as if he were the victim of some elaborate scheme. Meanwhile, Dominic monitored Avery's movements from afar. A private investigator sent him weekly reports, where she lived, where she worked, even which subway line she took. He told himself it was necessary. She could ruin him. She could ruin the IPO. She could ruin his public image, and that was the only thing that mattered to him. But Ethan Ward's sudden reappearance in Avery's life changed the balance. Dominic didn't know about Ethan. Not yet. He didn't know someone inside New York's investment world had started asking quiet questions about Hale Corp's past financial statements. He didn't know someone was watching him with the same intensity he used to watch Avery. All he knew was that Avery needed to stay silent. Forever. And that if she didn't, he had darker plans prepared. What Dominic didn't expect, what he couldn't imagine, was that Avery had someone far more powerful watching over her than he ever feared. The day Avery Monroe's world cracked open didn't happen in a dark alley or a private meeting room. It happened under bright supermarket lights, with the scent of citrus cleaner lingering in the air, while customers pushed carts past her without knowing they were walking through the first chapter of a scandal. It started with a notification. A little red bubble blinking on her cracked iPhone, the same phone she'd carried since her waitress days. She had just finished scanning groceries for an older woman when the device buzzed again and again. 5 notifications, then 10, then 20. At first she ignored them. She'd learned to silence unknown numbers, block unfamiliar emails, and delete the occasional disgusting message from trolls who believed they knew her life better than she did. But when she finally checked her phone during a break, her stomach twisted. A gossip headline stared back at her. CEO Dominic Hale targeted by model in secret blackmail scheme. Below it, a blurry photo of her, taken outside her Queens apartment, one hand on her stomach, eyes tired, hair pulled back after a long shift. The caption read, "Unstable former model claims to be pregnant with Hale's child, demands payout." A cold wave crashed through her. Her hands trembled so badly she dropped the phone. It clattered against the concrete break room floor as sweat prickled along her spine. A coworker looked over, but she forced a smile, pretending everything was fine. But it wasn't fine. It was a nightmare unfolding in real time. She picked the phone up, heart pounding. More articles had surfaced. Blog posts, reaction videos, anonymous comments painting her as a manipulative woman from a trashy background, a gold digger, a fame chaser trying to trap a billionaire CEO. And attached to several posts was the fake recording Valeria had created. A voice that sounded exactly like Avery's, frantic, desperate, begging Dominic for money. She knew it was edited. She knew the words weren't hers, but the public didn't know that. They never do. Her throat tightened. She tried calling the gossip account, emailing them, telling them it was fake. But nothing she said mattered. The story had already caught fire. Within an hour, the grocery store manager called her into the office. "Avery, we've been getting calls." Her heart dropped. "What kind of calls?" He rubbed his forehead. "Reporters, customers, people saying you're making a scene outside the store. We can't have that. It's not good for business." "I didn't make any scene," she whispered. "Someone took pictures of me outside my apartment. That's it." He exhaled slowly, avoiding her eyes. "I'm sorry, but corporate wants me to suspend you until things calm down." The world blurred. The walls felt closer. She tried to breathe, but her lungs refused to expand, suspended. No income, no savings, a baby coming. She walked out of the store in a fog, snowflakes melting on her eyelashes. She sat at the bus stop, gripping the phone so tightly her knuckles went white. Her messages kept filling with cruel comments from strangers who believed the edited audio without question. One read, "You're not even pretty enough for a CEO. Why would he touch you? Enjoy jail, liar." Another, "Women like you are why men can't trust anyone." She pressed her lips together, fighting tears. She refused to cry in public. But then her landlord sent a text, "Paparazzi outside again. Neighbors complaining. If this continues, I'll have to ask you to move out." Her chest caved in. She covered her face as tears finally broke free. Hot, humiliating, unstoppable. Dominic had taken her career. Now he was taking her home. And that night, when she stepped off the bus and turned onto her street, she saw a black car idling near the curb. Watching her, inside that car was a photographer. And someone far more dangerous. The night the black car followed Avery Monroe home was the night her spirit finally cracked. She walked faster, clutching her coat around her belly as the February wind sliced through Queens like a knife. Snow crunched beneath her boots, and every shadow felt like a threat waiting to reveal itself. The car rolled forward slowly, too slowly. Her pulse hammered. She glanced over her shoulder. A man in a hooded jacket stood beside the passenger door, holding a camera with a long lens. His face was half covered, but she recognized the predatory stillness. Paparazzi didn't usually come to this part of Queens. They preferred Manhattan, hotel entrances, red carpets. For them to show up here meant someone had sent them. And there was only one person who wanted her hunted. Avery hurried into her building and struggled to shove the door closed before the man could get a clearer shot. She pressed her back against the hallway wall, breath shaking, tears leaking between gasps. Her apartment was just 10 steps away, but her legs felt too weak to carry her. When she finally made it inside, she locked the door and fell to her knees. The heat barely worked. Her fingers were numb as she fumbled for her phone. Messages kept coming. Hundreds now. Some hateful, some mocking, a few fake accounts claiming to know the truth. Then a private number called. She shouldn't have answered. But she was tired, scared, and alone. She pressed the phone to her ear with trembling hands. "Hello? A familiar voice slid through the speaker, cold and sharp as steel. Avery? Her blood froze. Dominic? Yes. His tone was clipped, irritated, like she'd inconvenienced him simply by existing. This situation is getting out of hand. Out of hand? She whispered. You did this. You let them destroy me. He didn't deny it. You need to stop talking, stop reacting, stop trying to reach me. Every time you respond, it makes you look more guilty. I'm pregnant with your child, she snapped, voice breaking. And you're letting people call me a liar, a manipulator? Solve it quietly, he said. I don't care how. Tears blurred her vision. I won't get rid of my baby, Dominic. A long silence. Then don't expect help from me, he finally replied. And if you keep pushing, my lawyers will take everything, including custody. You can't fight me. You know that. The line went dead. Avery dropped the phone. A sharp pain shot through her chest. Not physical, but something deeper. Something that reached the very core of who she was. She curled onto her side on the cold apartment floor and sobbed until her throat burned. Hours later, when she could finally move again, Avery dragged herself to bed. But sleep wouldn't come. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard Dominic's voice. Detached, dismissive, powerful. The humiliation pressed into her like a weight. The next days were a blur of dread. Her manager finalized her suspension. Her landlord taped an eviction warning to her door. Paparazzi waited outside the building from morning till night, shouting insults and questions she couldn't bear to hear. Customers at the grocery store recognized her and whispered. Someone filmed her crying on the subway and posted it online. And then came the worst blow of all. A letter from Child Protective Services. Someone, anonymous, had filed a report accusing Avery of being unstable, mentally unfit, and financially incapable of caring for a child. The letter said they would be checking on her after the birth. Her legs nearly buckled as she read it. She sank into a chair, shaking uncontrollably. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Dominic wasn't just trying to silence her, he was trying to take her baby. For the first time since coming to New York, Avery felt entirely hopeless. She wrapped her arms around her stomach, whispering to the life growing inside her. I'm so sorry. I'm trying so hard. She didn't know help was already on its way. She didn't know someone else had read about her suspension. Someone who had seen the gossip article. Someone who recognized her name. And that person had already made one phone call that would change everything. A phone call to her father, Theo Monroe, who had no idea his daughter was drowning. The phone call that would change Avery Monroe's life forever began in an office far from the noise of Queens. Inside a penthouse overlooking Manhattan, where the city lights glowed like molten gold against the night. Theo Monroe sat at his polished walnut desk, a cup of untouched black coffee beside piles of investment reports. He was reviewing a merger's brief when his private line rang. Only 4 people in the world had that number. When he answered, a woman's urgent voice came through. Mr. Monroe, we found her. Theo stiffened. Found who? Avery. For a moment the world around him went silent. He leaned back slowly, breath unsteady. Repeat that. We confirmed her identity through the foundation records you gave us. Sir, your daughter, Avery Monroe, is in New York, and she's in serious trouble. Theo's heartbeat thudded like a hammer. For 26 years, he had waited for the chance to see the daughter he'd been forced to stay away from, by the woman he once loved, and by promises he never should have agreed to. Avery's mother had begged him to remain distant, to let Avery have a normal life without the danger that surrounded powerful men. And when she died, he searched, but her trail had gone cold, and grief had swallowed him whole. Now she was here, suffering, alone. Tell me everything, he said, voice rough. And they did. The suspension, the paparazzi, the pregnancy, the gossip headlines, the fake audio, the threat from Child Protective Services. By the time the call ended, Theo's hands were trembling, not from fear. He hadn't felt fear in decades, but from a rage so deep it made his vision blur. Dominic Hale. He recognized the name instantly. Hale Corp was a rising fintech star, but Theo had always sensed something off about Dominic. The way he moved through the financial world with manufactured charm, the way he avoided audits, the whispers of an old scandal. Theo had already invested quietly in a hedge fund circling Hale Corp. Now that connection felt like fate. He stood, grabbed his charcoal overcoat, and headed for the elevator. His security detail tried to follow, but he waved them off. Have the car brought around, now. In Queens, Avery lay curled on her mattress, eyes swollen from hours of crying. Her apartment was silent except for the distant hum of the rattling heater. She didn't know what else to do. She didn't know who else to call. She felt herself breaking in places she didn't know could break. Then there was a knock, soft, hesitant. Her body went rigid. Paparazzi usually shouted and pounded. CPS wouldn't come unannounced at midnight. She approached the door carefully, heart racing. "Avery?" A voice called gently. "It's Ethan." She unlocked the door, relief washing through her. Ethan Ward stood in the hallway, snow dampening his coat, concern etched into his face. He glanced behind her, noticing the darkness, the exhaustion carved under her eyes. "Are you okay?" he asked. Avery shook her head, too overwhelmed to form words. "I saw the article," Ethan continued softly, "and the video. I know it's fake." She blinked. "How?" "Because I know people who work in digital forensics, and because I know you're not the kind of person they're trying to paint you as." Her breath trembled. "Ethan, he's trying to destroy me." "I know," he said. "That's why I'm here." He stepped inside, closing the door gently behind him. For the first time in months, Avery didn't feel entirely alone. "You're not fighting this by yourself anymore," Ethan said firmly. "Someone else is coming, someone who should have been here years ago." Avery frowned. "Who?" Ethan hesitated, not from doubt, but from the weight of what he was about to reveal. "Avery, your father is alive, and he's coming for you." Her breath caught. Her knees nearly buckled. "My father?" Ethan nodded slowly. "And he is not just anyone. He's Theodore Monroe." Avery's vision blurred. She gripped the wall to steady herself. The man she thought abandoned her, the man she believed didn't care, the man she didn't even know how to hate properly, was a billionaire, and he was on his way. And Dominic Hale had no idea a storm was coming straight for him. For most of her life, Avery Monroe believed the word father meant nothing. It was just an empty space on school forms, a question she avoided, a wound she never touched. But the moment Ethan said Theodore Monroe's name, something inside her cracked open. Fear, disbelief, anger, hope, all tangled into one sharp breath she couldn't release. "He can't be my father," she whispered, gripping the back of a chair to steady herself. "My mother said he left us, that he didn't want me." Ethan stepped closer, careful, gentle. "Avery, your mother didn't tell you everything. Theo didn't abandon you. He was pushed away." Her pulse pounded in her ears. Why would she lie? Maybe to protect you, maybe because she thought his world was too dangerous. Ethan paused. "But he never stopped looking for you. Never." Avery shook her head, trying to swallow the rising panic. The room felt smaller, the walls closing in. A billionaire father? Her father? It didn't feel real. It felt like another lie, just one that hurt less than the others. Before she could respond, a knock sounded at the door. Avery froze. Ethan's eyes softened. "It's him." Her breath caught in her throat. She moved toward the door slowly, each step heavy, as if her body didn't trust what was about to happen. She unlocked it with trembling fingers. And there he was. Theo Monroe did not look like a billionaire stereotype. Yes, his charcoal coat was impeccably tailored. And yes, the elevator behind him hummed with the quiet efficiency of wealth. But his expression was not cold or distant. He looked terrified. "Avery," he said softly, voice cracking on her name. She stared at him, the gray at his temples, the lines carved from years of worry, the eyes that looked exactly like hers. Something inside her shifted painfully. You're my father?" He nodded, breath unsteady. "I've waited 26 years to hear you call me that." Before she knew it, Theo reached out but stopped inches from her arm, giving her the choice. Avery hesitated, her throat thick with emotion. Then, slowly, she stepped forward. Theo pulled her into an embrace so careful, so broken, Avery felt herself unravel. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was the kind of hug that said, "I'm sorry," in 1,000 silent ways. When they finally pulled apart, tears streamed down her face, and his. "I thought you didn't want me," Avery whispered. Theo wiped his cheek roughly. "Your mother asked me to stay away. She wanted you to have a normal life, without the dangers of mine. When she died, I tried to find you, but she'd changed her name, hid every trail." His voice trembled. "I failed you, but I won't fail you again." Avery swallowed hard, overwhelmed. "My life is a mess, Dominic." Theo's expression snapped into steel. "I know exactly what that man did." A chill ran down Avery's spine. "How?" Because I've been tracking HaleCorp for months, Theo said. And when I saw the headlines about a pregnant model being targeted, I recognized your eyes. I ran facial checks to be sure. Once confirmed, I mobilized everything. Ethan stepped forward. Theo already purchased 11% of HaleCorp quietly. Avery's lips parted. 11%? And I'm not finished, Theo said, voice low. Dominic Hale thinks he's untouchable. He thinks he can ruin you and walk away. He touched her shoulder gently. But Avery, he doesn't know who he's dealing with. He doesn't know you're my daughter. Her heart pounded. Not from fear, but from something resurfacing after months of drowning. Hope. But I don't want revenge, Avery whispered. I want my life back. I want my name cleared. I want my baby safe. Theo nodded. Then that's exactly what we'll take back. Ethan stepped beside her, his voice steady. You're not alone anymore, Avery. Not in any way. She looked at both men, one bound to her by blood, the other by quiet loyalty, and for the first time since the nightmare started, she felt her spine straighten. Avery Monroe wasn't just surviving anymore. She was preparing to fight, and the world had no idea what she was about to become. Avery Monroe never imagined that learning the truth about her father would only be the first shock of the night, because what Theo Monroe revealed next, what he had kept buried for decades, would flip her entire understanding of her past upside down. They sat together in her tiny Queens apartment, a mismatched trio squeezed onto a sagging couch. Theo's presence filled the room with an intensity that made it feel too small, while Ethan leaned quietly against the wall, watching Avery with protective eyes. Theo removed his gloves and set them on the table. There's something you deserve to know, he began, his voice heavy. Something that explains why your mother kept me away. Avery tensed. What is it? Theo inhaled slowly. Your mother wasn't just afraid of my world. She was afraid of the people who wanted to hurt me, and by extension, anyone connected to me. Avery blinked, confused. I don't understand. I wasn't always a quiet investor, Theo continued. Years ago, I exposed corruption inside a major financial institution. It nearly cost me everything. My career, my safety, and your mother's. His jaw tightened. She begged me to let her disappear, to protect you. She changed her name, moved states, and swore me to silence. Avery's throat tightened. You let me grow up without you, to keep us safe? Theo nodded, eyes filled with guilt. I didn't want to. I followed from a distance, checked on you through private channels, made sure your mother received help anonymously. But she refused contact, absolutely refused. When she passed, I tried to find you, but she had erased every trace. Avery swallowed back tears. For years she had hated a ghost. Now she saw the truth. Her mother hadn't abandoned her by hiding Theo. She had sacrificed everything. But why didn't you find me sooner? Avery whispered. I should have, Theo admitted. But grief blinded me. I searched for a year. When nothing surfaced, I broke. His voice cracked. I'm so sorry, Avery. I have lived with that regret every day. Avery's emotions tangled in her chest. Hurt, grief, anger, love, all mixed together. She reached out slowly and took his hand. You're here now, she said softly. That's what matters. Ethan's eyes warmed at the sight, but the moment of peace lasted only seconds. Theo straightened. There's more, and you have to hear it. Avery braced herself. HaleCorp, Theo said, is not just built on ruthless ambition. It's built on fraud. Fraud Dominic committed years ago and buried so deeply his own board doesn't know. Avery froze. Fraud? Massive fraud, Ethan confirmed. And if the SEC gets their hands on it, Dominic is finished. Theo nodded. The moment I saw Dominic Hale's name anywhere near my daughter's suffering, I started pulling files. His IPO is built on falsified metrics, manipulated startup losses, and investor money that was never logged properly. Avery stared between them, stunned. So, you already have evidence against him? Theo hesitated, just enough to make her pulse spike. Yes, he said. But that's not the surprising part. He locked eyes with her. The shocking part is why he buried the fraud. Avery's brows furrowed. Why? Theo exhaled. Because if it came out, it would expose someone else too. Ethan stepped forward. His current girlfriend, Valeria Knox. Avery's heart stumbled. Valeria? Theo nodded. She wasn't just his girlfriend back then. She was involved, deeply. They forged documents together. She helped funnel missing funds. Dominic protected her because they both had something to lose. Avery felt her stomach twist. So the woman who destroyed my reputation was protecting her own crime? Ethan nodded. And now she's desperate to keep this buried. Theo leaned forward, voice low and lethal. Avery, Valeria didn't attack you out of jealousy alone. She attacked you because you were the one thing that could push Dominic far enough to expose everything. Avery's breath caught. Dominic wasn't trying to silence her only because of the baby. He was trying to silence her because she was the crack in his foundation, the one that could bring his whole empire crashing down. Her chest tightened, but this time not from fear. Something else rose inside her. Strength, clarity, purpose. "What do we do now?" she asked. Theo's expression hardened into steel. He glanced at Ethan. "Now we start dismantling Dominic Hale, piece by piece." Avery didn't flinch. She nodded slowly, determination settling into her bones. If Dominic thought she was weak, he was about to learn how wrong he was. New York City always felt big to Avery Monroe. Loud trains, towering buildings, people with places to be. But walking into the Midtown corporate district with Theo Monroe and Ethan Ward at her side made the city feel different. It wasn't just intimidating anymore. It felt like a battleground. Avery pulled her scarf tighter around her neck as the winter wind whipped down Park Avenue. Glass towers reflected cold sunlight, and the rhythmic hum of traffic echoed like the pulse of the city. But she wasn't here as the struggling cashier from Queens today. She was here as the daughter of a billionaire. Theo's black sedan stopped in front of a high rise that seemed carved from steel and power. His firm's headquarters. Employees in tailored suits glanced up as they passed, whispers trailing behind them. Theo rarely appeared in person. To see him with a young woman stirred curiosity. But Avery kept her chin steady, the way Ethan had taught her the night before. "You don't have to become someone else," he'd said gently. "Just stop shrinking." So she didn't shrink. Not as she stepped into the marble lobby, not as the staff opened doors with sudden reverence, and not as she rode the silent elevator up to the 46th floor. When the doors slid open, Avery felt the shift instantly. The boardroom was enormous, lined with glass walls overlooking the Manhattan skyline. A long table of polished walnut stretched across the room, surrounded by leather chairs. Screens glowed with financial data. This wasn't her world, yet it felt strangely familiar, like a place she'd always been meant to walk into but never imagined she could. "This is where we begin," Theo said quietly. Avery nodded, heart pounding. Inside the boardroom, 3 senior partners waited. Their expressions were a blend of curiosity, respect, and mild shock, as if they were seeing something monumental take shape before their eyes. "This is my daughter, Avery," Theo said calmly, "and the victim of Dominic Hale's latest attempt to silence a liability." The partners exchanged sharp glances. Theo gestured for Avery to take a seat beside him. Her palms were cold, but her posture remained steady. Ethan stood behind her, offering silent support. "I've reviewed the preliminary files," he began. "With Avery's consent, we cross-referenced the timelines of Dominic's threats with Hale Corp's private financial revisions over the last 6 months. The correlation is illuminating." He tapped a key on the laptop. Screen switched to graphs, numbers, and internal documents, ones only someone with Ethan's clearance could access. Avery's breath caught. It was real. All of it. Dominic's fraud, his cover-ups, his threats, Valeria's involvement. Every piece was laid out with surgical precision. One partner leaned back, impressed. "If this is accurate, Hale Corp's valuation will collapse. The SEC will open an investigation immediately." Theo nodded, "Which is why we move carefully. I won't destroy an entire company if we can avoid it. Many people depend on Hale Corp's stability." Avery blinked in surprise. "You're protecting the company?" "I'm protecting the innocent," Theo corrected gently. "But Dominic, he's another story." Ethan spoke up. "Our plan is simple. Expose the truth, not with noise, but with precision. We'll initiate a quiet shareholder motion, force a leadership review, then release the financial discrepancies to the right regulators at the right time." Avery swallowed. "And what about the smear campaign against me?" "We'll clear that too," Ethan promised. "But not yet. First we take his power, then we take your name back." Avery felt something ignite inside her. Strength, resolve, fire. For months she'd been powerless, drowning, humiliated. Now she sat among people who could bring Dominic to his knees. The meeting continued. Legal strategy, timing, reputational recovery, safety protocols for Avery. She absorbed every word, feeling herself shift from victim to participant. When it ended, Theo placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "You belong in rooms like this," he said. Avery's eyes softened. "I never thought I would." Ethan smiled slightly. "You just needed the right people behind you." But as they stepped toward the elevator, Theo added in a low voice, "There's one more thing you must prepare for. Dominic will sense the shift, and when he does, he'll fight back harder." Avery met her father's eyes. "Then let him," she said quietly. "I'm done running." And somewhere across Manhattan, Dominic Hale felt the first tremor of the empire he thought would never fall. The Winter Gala at the Plaza Hotel was the kind of event Avery Monroe used to watch from the outside, literally. She once stood behind barricades, shivering in a thin jacket, watching glamorous guests glide through golden revolving doors. Now, she was walking through those same doors with her father's arm linked through hers, and Ethan Ward a step behind, alert, calm, quietly protective. The lobby glowed with chandeliers and polished marble floors. Wealthy donors laughed over champagne, their designer gowns brushing past Avery as if she'd always belonged here. But she hadn't forgotten who she used to be, the girl who rationed instant noodles and hid from paparazzi behind garbage bins in Queens. Tonight, she wasn't hiding. Theo leaned in slightly. "You don't have to stay long, just one appearance. Enough for the right people to take notice." Avery nodded, steadying her breath. "I can handle it." Ethan's reassuring smile helped more than she expected. "If you feel overwhelmed, just signal me. I'll get you out." She swallowed a surge of nerves. "I'm fine." But nothing could prepare her for the moment she saw him. Dominic Hale. He entered the ballroom like a storm, camera flashes erupting, reporters circling. He wore a midnight black suit tailored to perfection, his expression firm, charming, practiced. And at his side, glued to his arm like a trophy, was Valeria Knox in a glittering silver gown. Avery's heartbeat stuttered. Dominic hadn't seen her yet. He was too busy smiling for cameras, shaking hands with donors, pretending he wasn't the kind of man who threatened a pregnant woman into silence. But Valeria saw her. Valeria's smile faltered, just a tiny crack. But Avery noticed. And then Valeria leaned into Dominic's ear and whispered something that made him stiffen. Slowly, deliberately, he turned. And when his eyes landed on Avery, he froze. For the first time, Avery saw something crack through Dominic Hale's polished composure. Fear. He masked it quickly with a thin smile, but the damage was done. Theo stepped slightly closer to Avery, not protectively, but possessively, like a father reclaiming what should have always been his. Valeria slithered forward first, voice dipped in sugary poison. Well, isn't this surprising?" Avery didn't flinch. "Evening, Valeria." Dominic approached more slowly, tension visible in the tightness of his jaw. "Avery," he said, tone low, controlled. "You look different." "She looks safe," Ethan replied sharply before Avery could speak. Dominic's eyes flicked to Ethan with thinly veiled irritation. "And you are?" Ethan extended a hand, though his expression was ice. "Ethan Ward, Chief Investment Officer of Monroe Capital." Dominic's breath caught, just for a second. Theo's reputation alone was enough to intimidate most CEOs. But Theo with Ethan? And Ethan with Avery? That was a threat. Valeria's gaze darted between them. "Dominic, didn't you say Avery was?" Dominic cut her off sharply. "Not now." Theo stepped forward, his presence towering. "Hale." Dominic swallowed. "Mr. Monroe, I didn't expect to see you here." "Clearly," Theo replied smoothly. "I imagine you didn't expect to see my daughter either." Silence. Dominic's pupils constricted. His voice hardened. "Your daughter?" Avery's chin lifted. "Surprised?" Dominic searched her face, trying to regain his footing. He failed. "I didn't know," he muttered. "You weren't supposed to," Theo said coldly, "but you dragged her into your lies anyway." The tension tightened until Valeria's nerves snapped. "Dominic, we should go." "No," Avery said, stepping forward. "You two put me through hell. You ruined my name, my job, my home, and you thought I'd just disappear." Dominic's mask slipped. "Avery, this isn't the place." "That didn't stop you from humiliating me in public," she shot back. Dominic clenched his jaw. "We'll talk privately." "We won't," Theo said. "If you want a conversation, you speak to my legal team." Dominic turned pale. Avery didn't blink, and Valeria suddenly realized she wasn't standing beside the strongest person in the room anymore. Dominic tried to steady himself. "Avery, you're making a mistake." Avery held his gaze. "No," she said softly. "I'm correcting one." And as Dominic watched her walk away, arm in arm with the billionaire father he never knew existed, his empire felt its first real tremor. Avery Monroe expected Dominic Hale to retreat after the disastrous gala confrontation. She expected him to lick his wounds, regroup with lawyers, maybe tighten his PR shield. But she'd underestimated how desperate a man becomes when he senses his world slipping through his fingers. Dominic, he attacked. It started the next morning. Avery woke in Theo's penthouse guest suite, sunlight spilling across white marble floors. For a moment she forgot the chaos outside, the headlines, the lies, the fear. But then her phone buzzed with an unknown number. A familiar voice slid into her ear. "Avery, we need to talk." "Dominic." She sat up fast. "How did you get this number?" "You forget who I am," he replied coolly. "People talk when I ask." Her pulse spiked with anger and dread. "I have nothing to say to you, but I have something to say to you," Dominic said, his tone dripping with manufactured calm. "Last night, that wasn't who I am. Things got heated. Theo tried to intimidate me. You were emotional. We all were." Avery clenched her jaw. "Stop pretending you care. Listen to me," Dominic hissed. "You're being manipulated. Theo is using you. He wants my company. He's wanted it for months. You think it's a coincidence he suddenly appears when you're vulnerable?" Avery paced across the room, heart pounding. "You're lying." "Am I?" Dominic pressed. "You don't find it strange that he never looked for you until now? That he magically appears right when Hale Corp is preparing for its IPO?" Her breath shook. He knew exactly where to strike. Her deepest insecurity, the wound that wasn't fully healed. Dominic continued, voice smooth as poison. "He abandoned you for 26 years, Avery. And now he's your hero? Don't be naive." Avery swallowed hard. "You don't know anything about my father." "I know he's dangerous," Dominic snapped. "I know he wants to destroy me, and he's using you to do it. That's what men like Theo Monroe do. They manipulate, they buy, they own." Avery's hands trembled. For a flicker of a second, doubt slipped in. Dominic heard it. He softened his voice instantly. "Avery, we can fix this, the two of us, without outside interference. I'm willing to settle this quietly. No court, no press, no legal team. I'll help you. I'll help the baby. Just meet me. 1 hour. Public place." It was his most dangerous move yet. Not legal threats, not intimidation, but emotional manipulation. Gaslighting. A rewrite of history where he was the victim, where she was lucky to have his attention, where Theo was the villain. Avery forced herself to breathe. Dominic's lies were wrapping around her like chains she'd worn for months. She hated how familiar this felt. "I'm not meeting you," she said finally. He chuckled darkly. "You think Ethan Ward can protect you? He's a nobody, a glorified advisor, and Theo, he'll drop you the second you stop being useful." Her chest tightened with fury. "You don't get to talk about them. They're USing you." Dominic exploded. "Wake up." Avery's spine straightened. Dominance, control, rage. That was the real Dominic Hale. The mask had finally slipped. "No," she whispered, voice trembling but sure. "You used me. You lied to me. You tried to destroy me. And you threatened my child." Silence. Avery's hands shook as she delivered the truth he feared most. "You're afraid of me, Dominic. That's why you're calling. Because I'm not alone anymore." Dominic growled under his breath, a sound that confirmed everything. "This isn't over," he spat. "You've just made the biggest mistake of your life." Then he hung up. Avery stood still, breathing hard, adrenaline coursing through her veins. She didn't hear Ethan enter until he spoke softly behind her. "Dominic called you, didn't he?" Avery turned, eyes burning. "He tried to twist everything. He always does." Ethan stepped closer, his voice calm but edged with steel. "You didn't believe him, did you?" She hesitated only for a second. "No," she said finally. "Not anymore." Ethan exhaled in relief, but the tension in his shoulders didn't fade. "He's losing control," Ethan said. "That makes him dangerous." Avery nodded, heart pounding. But she didn't know the full danger yet. Because at that exact moment, Dominic Hale was already planning his next move, and this time, he wasn't coming after her reputation. He was coming for something much more vulnerable. Valeria Knox had always believed she was the smartest person in the room. That was her curse. She walked through life assuming she could read everyone, their ambitions, weaknesses, secrets, just by watching how they held a champagne glass or how they posed for a photo. And for a long time, she had been right, until Avery Monroe. Avery ruined everything. Not because Dominic cared about Avery. Valeria knew he didn't. Dominic didn't care about any woman, not really. But Avery was different because she threatened something far more precious to Valeria: control. After the gala, Valeria paced her penthouse in Soho, her sequin dress still on, makeup smudged, phone buzzing non-stop with PR warnings. Dominic had come home furious, snapping at her, refusing to answer her questions, shutting himself in his office with 2 stiff drinks and a locked door. That's when Valeria realized something was off. Something big. She pulled up the news articles again. Photos from the gala were everywhere. Avery Monroe standing between Ethan Ward and billionaire Theodore Monroe, looking nothing like the unstable manipulator Valeria's team had painted her to be. The internet, always hungry for a twist, had shifted tone overnight. Who is Avery Monroe? Is Hale Corp CEO hiding more secrets? Why did Dominic Hale panic at the plaza? Panic, an emotion Valeria had never associated with him. She needed answers. She moved to Dominic's office door, knocking lightly. "Dom, we need to talk about this. The optics are..." "Not now," Dominic snapped from the other side. Valeria's jaw clenched. He never used that tone with her, not unless he was hiding something, so she waited. At 3:17 a.m., Dominic finally passed out on the couch, whiskey bottle half empty beside him. Valeria slipped into his office like a shadow, her bare feet silent against the hardwood floor. She knew his passwords. She had learned long ago that beautiful women didn't need hacking skills when men were careless with affection. She opened his email, then his encrypted folder. And what she found made the blood drain from her face. Reports, transactions, deleted audits. A trail of financial decisions she didn't understand but recognized because she'd helped create some of them years ago. Back then she thought she was helping build a future with Dominic, tightening their bond with shared secrets. Now those secrets had teeth. She clicked deeper into the files and froze. There it was. A security report with Avery's name, surveillance notes, photos, a copied birth certificate form she'd never seen before. CPS logs. Avery wasn't just a random fling. Dominic had been tracking her for months. A sick, twisting feeling filled Valeria's stomach. She scrolled faster. Emails to lawyers, instructions to contain the girl, warnings about the pregnancy risk, and discussion about how exposing Avery would protect Dominic's IPO. And then, the final blow. A contingency plan naming Valeria herself as a liability. Dominic had drafted an internal memo to remove her from the brand partnership after the IPO. Replace her, cut contact, end everything. Her hands shook. He was going to throw her away the second she became inconvenient, just like he tried to throw away Avery. No, worse. Because Valeria had helped him do it. The realization sparked something dangerous inside her. Rage, betrayal, fear, and beneath it all, a cold, consuming clarity. Dominic Hale wasn't just her partner. He was her enemy. She took photos of every document, emails, financial reports, the CPS threat file, everything she needed to protect herself if things collapsed. Her fingers moved fast, precise. Then she found something she hadn't expected. A calendar meeting scheduled for the next morning. Meeting Rogers, custody leverage strategy. Custody leverage. He was planning to take Avery's baby. Valeria stepped back, breath trembling. Dominic wasn't spiraling. He was escalating. She walked out of the office quietly, fury simmering beneath her ribs. Avery Monroe wasn't the only woman Dominic Hale had underestimated. And Valeria Knox wasn't planning to stay quiet. Because the moment Dominic tried to erase her, she decided she would burn him down first. Avery Monroe had survived humiliation, headlines, and being hunted by paparazzi. But nothing prepared her for the moment she learned Dominic Hale planned to take her baby. It happened on a gray morning, the kind where New York felt like a giant exhaling cold fog. Avery sat at the long marble breakfast counter in Theo's penthouse, wrapped in one of his oversized cashmere sweaters. She was supposed to be resting, Theo insisted, but her mind refused to slow. She kept replaying Dominic's last call, his voice dripping with venom, his threat echoing like a curse. "He'll come after us," she murmured, rubbing her belly. "I know he will." Ethan set a warm mug of tea in front of her. "You're safe here." But safety was a fragile thing. Moments later, Theo entered the room with an expression so dark, Ethan straightened instantly. He handed Avery an envelope. Thick, official, stamped with a seal she recognized all too well. CPS. Child Protective Services. Avery's pulse spiked. No, not again. Theo's jaw tightened. "This came to my office an hour ago. Someone filed a second complaint. A second. Avery whispered, voice cracking. On what grounds? Theo hesitated, and that terrified her more than anything. He opened the envelope and slid the papers onto the counter. The allegations were worse this time. Claims that Avery was unstable, had violent mood swings, was unemployed, was being investigated for blackmail, and, worst of all, was mentally unfit to care for a newborn. Avery gripped the counter as her vision blurred. This is all lies. I know, Theo said quietly, and so does my legal team. But this is targeted. Ethan's expression turned sharp. Dominic, he's weaponizing CPS. Avery felt cold all over. He's trying to steal my baby. Theo nodded once. Yes. For a long moment, silence settled like fog. Avery's chest hurt, her breathing shallow. She remembered nights crying alone in her Queens apartment, terrified she wouldn't even be able to provide formula. Now Dominic wanted to rip her child away before he was even born. He can't win, she whispered. He can't. Ethan knelt beside her, taking her hands gently. Avery, listen to me. CPS won't remove a child based on anonymous claims, and with Theo's legal team involved, you're protected. Dominic can try, but he won't succeed. Theo pulled out another document, this one an internal Hale Corp legal memo stamped confidential. Ethan and I obtained this through a secure channel. Avery blinked hard, scanning the words. Custody leverage strategy, goal. Remove maternal influence, eliminate risk to CEO reputation, establish paternal guardianship post-birth. She felt dizzy. He planned this? Before I even gave birth? Theo's voice dropped into a low, lethal calm. He planned everything. The moment you told him you were pregnant, he started laying groundwork to take the child. Smearing you publicly was step 1. Creating a legal narrative was step 2. CPS was step 3. And step 4? Avery whispered. Ethan exhaled slowly. Step 4 is court. Avery's breath hitched. I can't go up against him in court. He has money, influence, lawyers. Theo rested a hand on her shoulder, gentle, steady. And now, so do you. Avery looked between them. Her father, the billionaire she thought had abandoned her, and Ethan, the quiet force who had stood beside her since the moment he stepped out of that SUV. There was strength in their eyes she didn't yet have in herself. But she could borrow it until she did. Still, her voice trembled. What if I lose? Ethan shook his head. You won't. Because we won't let him rewrite your story again. Then Theo added something that made Avery sit straighter. Dominic Hale thinks he's building a custody case. What he doesn't realize is that he just triggered a federal investigation. Filing false CPS reports is a crime, and now we can trace every whisper back to him. Avery's breath caught. Meaning? She whispered. Theo's eyes hardened. Meaning we finally have a legal path to destroy him. Avery felt something shift inside her, fear turning into focus. Dominic wasn't just threatening her anymore. He was threatening her child, and she would burn his empire to the ground before letting that happen. But what none of them knew was that Valeria Knox had just uncovered proof that could end Dominic even faster. And she was on her way to use it. The boardroom on the 52nd floor of Monroe Capitol wasn't meant for emotional conversations. It was meant for war. Glass walls reflected the Manhattan skyline. Long walnut tables stretched like runways for power, and leather chairs were arranged with the precision of a military formation. It was a room where fortunes shifted, where CEOs cried behind closed doors, where reputations were rebuilt or obliterated before breakfast. Today, the target on the table was Dominic Hale. Avery Monroe sat between Theo and Ethan, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Her heartbeat pulsed in her throat as partners and legal advisors filed into the room. She had never stood in rooms like this before, rooms where decisions shaped the financial world. But something inside her had changed since the CPS attack. She wasn't the trembling woman who hid from paparazzi anymore. She was a mother, a daughter, a woman Dominic Hale would never crush again. Theo stood at the head of the table, towering in presence, if not height. When he spoke, his voice filled the room with a quiet authority that demanded attention. "Thank you for coming," he began, sliding a folder toward each partner. "Hale Corp has crossed a line, multiple lines in fact, and now they've made it personal." The partners opened the folders. Inside were documents, copies of false CPS complaints, legal memos from Dominic's internal team, doctored reports meant to smear Avery, and even timeline evidence showing Dominic coordinated attacks on her career. A hush settled over the room like falling snow. One partner, a silver-haired woman named Miriam Rhodes, exhaled sharply. He tried to take custody of her baby before it's even born? Theo nodded. Yes. That's monstrous, she muttered. Another partner flipped through the pages, eyebrows lifting. These CPS filings, if traced back to him, they're criminal. They will be traced back to him, Ethan said, stepping forward. We've already preserved the metadata and IP logs. Avery looked at Ethan in surprise. You already did? He nodded once, giving her a reassuring glance. We're not letting him get ahead of us again. Theo continued, pacing slowly. Hale Corp is weeks away from filing final documents for their IPO. If Dominic stays in charge, the financial risk is catastrophic. The fraud we uncovered is enough to tank the company and drag innocent shareholders with it. Another partner frowned. What's your proposal? Theo turned to the window, hands clasped behind his back. We initiate a soft takeover. Murmurs erupted, excited, nervous, electrified. Theo raised a hand. Not a hostile takeover. Not yet. We quietly buy voting shares, rally disillusioned investors, and push for an emergency leadership review. Ethan added, we already have several minority shareholders willing to align with us. Dominic's reputation is cracking internally. People are scared. Avery sat straighter. What about the fraud evidence? Theo looked at her gently. We'll hold it, for now. Once we secure enough influence on the board, we force them to confront it from within. They'll have no choice but to remove Dominic. And Avery's name? Ethan asked. That, Theo replied. We restore publicly the second Dominic loses power. A swell of determination rose in Avery's chest. For the first time, the future didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a weapon she could hold. One partner raised a hand. There's one major risk. Theo nodded, expecting it. That Dominic will retaliate. He will, Ethan agreed. He's already accelerating his custody strategy, and he's digging into Avery's past, hoping for weakness. Avery felt her stomach twist, but she didn't falter. Let him dig. I don't have anything left to fear. The room stilled. Theo approached her, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. I made the mistake of letting your mother walk away because she thought my world was dangerous. I lost her. I lost you. I will not lose you again. Emotion tightened Avery's throat. You're not going to. Ethan's voice softened. You're stronger than you think, Avery. She looked at him, something warm sparking between them. A flicker she wasn't ready to name, but couldn't ignore. Theo turned back to the boardroom. Prepare the acquisition strategy. Today marks the beginning of the end for Dominic Hale. Partners nodded, energy shifting, the plan locking into place. But just as Avery allowed herself a breath of relief, Theo's assistant rushed in, pale and shaking. Mr. Monroe, there's an urgent situation. Theo stiffened. What kind of situation? The assistant swallowed hard. Dominic Hale just leaked something. Avery's heart dropped. What did he leak? She whispered. The assistant barely got the words out. Your medical records. The room exploded into chaos. Avery Monroe had lived through humiliation before, but nothing compared to the moment she saw her own medical records plastered across the internet like a public execution. It hit her like a physical blow. 1 minute she was in the boardroom preparing to dismantle Dominic Hale, the next she was staring at headlines that ripped her privacy apart. Leaked. Model's medical history shows mental stress episodes during pregnancy. Is Avery Monroe fit to be a mother? Insider sources claim instability. All lies. All weaponized. Theo grabbed his coat without hesitation, fury simmering under his calm exterior. We're going to the courthouse, now. Ethan was already dialing someone. Avery couldn't tell if it was a lawyer, a forensic specialist, or maybe both. The boardroom erupted as the partners discussed legal violations, HIPAA breaches, criminal charges, but Avery couldn't hear any of it. Her ears rang. Her breath came shallow, too fast, too uneven. She felt the world spinning again, like the floor had dropped out from under her. Ethan reached her first, hands gentle on her arms. Avery, look at me. But she couldn't. Her vision blurred. My baby, she whispered. He's doing this to take my baby. Ethan's jaw tightened. No, he's doing this because he's panicking. And panicking men make stupid mistakes. He just gave us exactly what we needed. Avery shook her head. But everyone can see it. Everyone can read it. Theo stepped toward her, voice surprisingly soft. And they'll see the truth when we're done. I promise you that. 30 minutes later, Avery found herself inside a black SUV speeding toward the courthouse. Outside the tinted windows, Manhattan blurred. A mix of honking cars, flashing lights, and people going about their day unaware of the hurricane swallowing her life. But as they arrived, she realized someone was aware. Reporters. Dozens of them. They were waiting on the courthouse steps like vultures. Microphones, cameras, aggressive voices calling her name. Security pushed them back, but not far enough. Avery, did you fake your medical documents? Sources say you were unstable during pregnancy. Comment? Dominic Hale claims you're a danger to the child. Is that true? Is that your father of money to attack Dominic? The last question made Theo stop mid-stride, eyes sharp and dangerous. Ethan slipped an arm behind Avery protectively, guiding her through the chaos. Don't answer, he murmured. Inside the courthouse, the air was colder, quieter, but the pressure remained. Avery sat at the long wooden table beside Theo's legal team while the judge reviewed emergency motions. Dominic's attorneys stood across the room, 3 men and 1 woman, all in sleek charcoal suits, all with expressions that screamed confidence. Smug confidence. The kind of confidence that said, "We've bought our way out of worse." One of them leaned toward Avery's team and whispered, "This will go faster if your client stops pretending to be the victim." Ethan moved so fast the lawyer stepped back instantly. "Say that again," Ethan warned, voice low enough to chill the air. Theo placed a hand on Ethan's arm. "Not here." Avery's breath trembled. "He leaked my records. How is he not in handcuffs?" The lead attorney, a woman named Amelia Grant, leaned closer. "He will be. But first we get the temporary protective order. Then we get custody secured. Then we destroy him." The judge finally spoke, flipping through pages. "The court acknowledges the medical leak, which constitutes a serious privacy violation under federal law. Ms. Monroe, do you wish to speak?" Avery froze. For months she'd cried in silence. Hidden silence. Broken silence. But not today, she stood. "Your Honor," she began, voice shaking but clear. "I haven't been unstable. I haven't endangered my child. What I have done is survive being stalked, threatened, smeared, and hunted by a man who thinks his power makes him untouchable." Dominic's lawyers stiffened. "These records were taken without my consent, altered without my knowledge, and leaked to the world to label me unfit. My only crime is refusing to disappear." The courtroom murmured. Avery exhaled slowly. "And I won't disappear. Not from my child's life. Not from the truth." The judge tapped his gavel. "Temporary protective order granted. CPS involvement suspended pending investigation. Hale Corp CEO Dominic Hale is forbidden from contacting Ms. Monroe directly or indirectly until further review." Avery collapsed into her seat, trembling with relief. Ethan squeezed her hand under the table. "You did it." Theo leaned in. "This is only the beginning." But outside the courthouse, cameras waited, and a sleek town car idled at the curb. Inside it, unseen, sat Valeria Knox, holding evidence that could destroy Dominic completely, and she was finally ready to choose sides. When Avery Monroe stepped into the Hale Corp headquarters for the first time, she felt a strange, electric mix of fear and power rush through her. The towering glass building on Park Avenue gleamed under the winter sun, its steel facade reflecting the city like a cold, polished shield. She had once looked at places like this and felt small. Today she wasn't small. Today she was walking into enemy territory with purpose. Theo Monroe, in a charcoal coat and calm determination, walked beside her. Ethan Ward stayed close behind, sharp-eyed and steady, a silent promise that she wasn't alone. Security ushered them through private elevators straight to the top floor, where the Hale Corp boardroom awaited like a stage set for a reckoning. The doors opened. Gasps rippled across the room. 12 board members sat at the long glass table, stunned to see Avery, the woman Dominic had tried to paint as unstable, unhinged, unfit, walk in with the 2 most feared men in finance at her side. Dominic Hale stood at the head of the table, visibly rattled. He masked it behind a stiff smile, but Avery saw the fear flicker in his eyes. He hadn't expected her to show up. He had especially not expected her to walk in looking calm and composed, wearing a tailored black dress that made her seem older, stronger. "What is this?" Dominic snapped. "You can't just walk into my board meeting." Theo stepped forward. "This isn't your board anymore." He tossed a stack of documents onto the table. "As of this morning, Monroe Capital has acquired an additional 7% of Hale Corp voting shares. Combined with existing alliances." He let the silence hang. We now hold influence over 41% of your leadership decisions. Shock rippled across the room. Dominic's face drained of color. This is hostile. No, Ethan said, stepping forward. This is accountability. Avery's pulse hammered, but she kept her expression steady. Dominic stared at her, fury simmering beneath the surface. You brought her here? He hissed at Theo. This is harassment. She's manipulating you. Avery took a step forward before Theo could respond. No, Dominic. You manipulated me. You smeared me. You stalked me. You tried to weaponize my pregnancy. You leaked my medical records. Her voice didn't shake. To her surprise, it echoed. Now you're losing control, and you can't stand it. Board members exchanged sharp looks. One of them, an older man with steel gray hair, cleared his throat. Mr. Hale, is any of that true? Dominic straightened. Of course not. She's lying. She has been from the beginning. A quiet voice came from the doorway. No, Dominic, you're lying. Every head turned. Valeria Knox walked into the boardroom, elegant, immaculate, eyes burning with betrayal. In her hands she held a thin manila folder. Avery's breath caught. Dominic's did too. Valeria walked right up to the table. I'm done covering for you, she said softly, and I'm done letting you destroy other women to save yourself. Dominic's voice cracked. Valeria, don't. She dropped the folder onto the table. Paper slid out. Emails, time-stamped messages, financial edits, CPS instructions, digital manipulation requests. The evidence. The room erupted. Board members stood. One cursed. Another demanded legal counsel. Dominic lunged toward Valeria, but Ethan stepped in front of Avery instinctively, while Theo blocked Dominic with a single cold glare. You set this up, Dominic growled. All of you. This is a conspiracy. No, Theo replied calmly. This is the truth catching up with you. The chairman slammed his gavel on the table. Enough, Mr. Hale. Due to the severity of what we're seeing, the board is calling for an immediate vote of no confidence. Dominic paled. You can't do this. The IPO is the reason we must do this, the chairman snapped. Your behavior jeopardizes everything. Avery felt her knees weaken, but not from fear. From closure. From justice. From breath finally returning after months of drowning. The vote was taken. The results were unanimous. Dominic Hale was removed as CEO. Security entered to escort him out, but as Dominic passed Avery, he leaned in, eyes burning with hatred and something hollow. This isn't over, he whispered. Avery didn't flinch. Yes, Dominic, she said softly, it is. And as he was dragged from the room, Avery felt the first true moment of victory settle into her bones like warmth after a brutal winter. News doesn't travel slowly in New York. It moves like electricity, sparking, snapping, every screen before anyone can catch their breath. By the time Avery, Theo, and Ethan stepped out of Hale Corp headquarters, the city was already buzzing. Dominic Hale removed as CEO. Hale Corp board votes no confidence. Allegations of misconduct, fraud, and CPS manipulation surface. The headlines spread like wildfire. Reporters swarmed the entrance, shouting questions. Camera flashes exploded like fireworks. Security blocked them, but Avery still felt the heat of the chaos. And strangely, she didn't feel afraid. For the first time, she felt powerful. Inside a chauffeured SUV, she watched through tinted glass as the crowd outside roared for answers. Some reporters screamed Dominic's name. Others held up copies of leaked documents Valeria had dropped in the boardroom hours earlier, proof of far more than the public had imagined. Fraud, stalking, privacy violations, manipulation of federal child services. Dominic's entire persona, America's self-made fintech genius, was cracking like glass under pressure. Ethan checked his phone, expression dark. It's worse than we expected. Investors are pulling out. Stock is plummeting. And the SEC, they're not just sniffing around, they're circling. Avery exhaled. So this is really happening. Theo placed a hand on her shoulder. This is justice beginning. But it wasn't over. Not yet. Across town, in a luxury penthouse Dominic no longer owned, his corporate access revoked minutes after the vote, Dominic Hale stood alone, surrounded by shattered glass and broken pride. He had thrown a whiskey glass at the TV, splintering the screen that dared display his downfall. This couldn't be real. He was Dominic Hale. He was untouchable. Yet the world was turning its back on him in real time. Every channel replayed footage from the gala, the boardroom leak, speculations, expert analyses pointing out lies he'd buried for years. His phone buzzed non-stop, texts from lawyers urging him to keep quiet, from investors threatening lawsuits, from journalists begging for comment. from Valeria. Valeria. He had made her, lifted her platform, paid for her public image, and she betrayed him first. Dominic slammed his fist against the marble countertop. Rage boiled under his skin like lava. This wasn't his fault, it was Avery Monroe's. She ruined everything. He paced, breathing hard. The media would cool off, investors would forget. He could rebuild. He would rebuild. All he needed was a counterattack. Something that would make Avery look like the unstable, manipulative liar he always insisted she was. Then he froze. A notification popped onto his cracked TV screen from a financial news alert. Monroe Capital expected to file formal SEC complaint against former Halicorp CEO. His entire body went cold. Theo Monroe wasn't just backing Avery. Theo was using the full force of his empire against him. Avery had an army. Dominic had nothing. Meanwhile, back at Monroe Capital's private offices, Avery sat with the crisis team as they prepared for the next phase. The public statement. Theo looked at her. Are you sure you want to speak publicly? We can release something on your behalf. Avery shook her head slowly. He hid behind silence. I'm not doing that. Not anymore. Ethan's eyes softened with admiration, and something warmer. You'll be brilliant. She took a breath. I'm not doing this for brilliance. I'm doing it for my son. Dominic used my silence as a weapon. Now I'm taking that weapon back. Theo nodded, pride flickering across his usually composed features. Then tomorrow morning at 9 sharp, we go on record. Avery's hands curled into fists, not of fear, but resolve. The world would finally hear her truth, and Dominic would watch every second of it. Across the city, Dominic rushed toward his front door as agents knocked, firm, unyielding. Dominic Hale? A voice called out. He froze. This is the Securities and Exchange Commission. We need to speak with you regarding multiple financial discrepancies. His breath caught. This wasn't a nightmare. This was justice. And for the first time in his life, Dominic Hale understood what it meant to fall with no one left to catch him. Avery Monroe didn't sleep the night before her public statement. How could she? The city hummed outside Theo's penthouse windows, headlights streaking across the streets below like veins of moving light. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Dominic's face in the boardroom. Twisted, defeated, venomous. She saw agents knocking on his door. She saw the headlines, the chaos, the collapse. She had wanted justice for so long, but now that it was unfolding, she felt heavy. Morning sunlight crept through the glass. Avery sat at the kitchen island, hands around a mug she hadn't touched. Ethan entered quietly, tie half knotted, hair still damp from the shower. He paused when he saw her expression. You didn't sleep, he said softly. She shook her head. I kept thinking about everything, about him, about what comes next. Ethan moved closer, resting his palms on the counter. You don't have to carry this alone. Avery looked up, meeting his eyes. That's the problem. He can't hurt me anymore. But he can hurt other people when he's desperate. Even now, there's a part of me that wants to see him pay for everything, but another part wonders, how far is too far? Ethan studied her, silent for a moment. You don't need revenge, Avery. You need peace. They're not the same. She swallowed. What if peace doesn't feel as satisfying? He smiled gently. Then you haven't seen what real peace feels like yet. Before Avery could respond, Theo walked in, dressed in a navy suit that radiated authority. It's time, he said. You ready? Avery nodded, but she wasn't ready for what awaited downstairs. When the elevator doors opened into the private lobby, Avery froze. Reporters filled the entire hallway. Security held them back as microphones stretched like reaching hands. Flashbulbs burst. Voices clashed. Avery, do you think Dominic should go to prison? Are you seeking full custody? What about the leaked records? Were they fake? Is Theodore Monroe funding a personal vendetta? Avery's heart hammered, but Theo placed a steady hand at her back. Ethan stepped to her other side, shielding her from the closest cameras. A podium waited outside, facing a sea of press vans, lights, and lenses. Avery inhaled deeply. She felt the weight of millions watching. This was the moment she reclaimed her story. Theo took the microphone first. Good morning. Thank you for coming. My daughter Avery Monroe will speak directly today. This statement is hers alone. Avery stepped forward. The crowd hushed. She looked out at the ocean of faces, her voice surprisingly steady. My name is Avery Monroe. For months I have been threatened, harassed, followed, and smeared by Dominic Hale. A wave of flashes erupted. But I'm not here to tear him down. The law will handle what he's done. I'm here because he tried to take something from me that no one has the right to take, my child." Her voice faltered for a moment, but she pushed forward. "He filed false reports. He leaked private medical information. He tried to make the world believe I was unfit, and for a long time, I believed him. I believed my life had no power." She looked toward Theo, then Ethan. "But I realized something. Power isn't about money or status. It's about choosing who you become when someone tries to break you." Avery steadied herself. "I'm choosing to stop fighting Dominic in the shadows. I'm choosing to raise my son without fear. I'm choosing to let the truth speak for itself." Reporters scribbled furiously. "And I'm choosing," she continued softly, "to live a life where Dominic Hale's name no longer controls me." The crowd buzzed, moved, stunned. A reporter shouted, "Are you seeking revenge?" Avery shook her head. "No, I'm seeking justice and a future my child can be proud of." Theo stepped behind her, pride radiating from him. Ethan looked at her with something deeper, something she wasn't ready to name but couldn't ignore. The conference ended in an avalanche of camera clicks. Security escorted them back toward the building. Avery exhaled, finally feeling the weight lift from her shoulders. But as they reached the private elevator, Ethan leaned close and whispered, "Dominic's lawyers filed something 10 minutes ago." Avery's stomach dropped. "What?" "The last card he has left." Ethan paused. "He's challenging the protective order." Avery's breath caught. Dominic Hale wasn't done fighting yet. The courtroom felt colder than any place Avery Monroe had ever stood. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. The polished wood smelled of old varnish and quiet battles. She sat at the plaintiff's table, hands folded over her stomach, every breath measured. This wasn't just another hearing. This was it. The final fight. Dominic Hale's last attempt to destroy her, or be destroyed himself. Theo sat beside her, composed and immovable. Ethan took the seat on her other side, every muscle alert, jaw set tight. Across the room, Dominic's lawyers whispered urgently around him. Dominic himself looked different, wild around the eyes, pale, aging in real time. The fall had cracked him open, exposed the hollow center of everything he built. Judge Whitmore entered. "All rise." Everyone stood. When the judge took her seat, the room settled into tense silence. Dominic's attorney wasted no time. "Your Honor," he said, standing confidently, "we are requesting the reversal of the protective order against Mr. Hale. We believe Ms. Monroe's public statements are acts of defamation, emotionally compromising Mr. Hale's well-being and preventing him from fulfilling his rights as a future father." Avery felt Ethan flinch beside her. Dominic clasped his hands together like he was suddenly a concerned father, a martyr, the victim. Theo leaned in and whispered, "Desperation looks ugly on him." The judge nodded to Avery's counsel. "Miss Grant, your response?" Avery's attorney stood. "Your Honor, Mr. Hale is not the victim. He orchestrated a smear campaign, falsified medical records, filed fraudulent CPS reports, and used corporate resources to stalk Miss Monroe. We have evidence for all of it." Dominic's lawyer scoffed. "Circumstantial?" "No," Ms. Grant replied calmly. "Documented." She handed the judge a heavy binder, the one Valeria had risked everything to assemble. The judge flipped through it. Her brows rose higher with every page. Emails, altered files, threat messages, tracking reports, CPS fabrication memos, financial fraud. Dominic paled visibly, but then came something no one expected. "Your Honor," Ms. Grant continued, "we also have a witness who wishes to speak." Whispers shot across the courtroom. The door at the back opened, and Valeria Knox walked inside. No makeup, no glam squad, no designer dress. Just a plain black coat and the weight of truth pressing her forward. Dominic surged to his feet, fury breaking through. "Valeria, don't you dare." "Sit down, Mr. Hale," the judge ordered sharply. Valeria approached the stand, hands shaking, though not from fear. From relief, she raised her right hand and swore to tell the truth, and she did. For 20 straight minutes, Valeria explained everything, every lie Dominic crafted, every time he asked her to smear Avery. Every manipulated file, every threat, every late-night whisper about keeping the problem quiet. She ended with one sentence that broke the courtroom open. He never cared about the baby. He cared about winning. Dominic stood abruptly. "You're lying. You're all lying. This is a conspiracy. Theo Monroe has been after me for years." "Sit down, Mr. Hale," the judge snapped again. But Dominic lost control. "I built this city," he screamed. "You think you can take everything from me? You think she deserves anything? She was nothing, a nobody." "Enough." The judge's voice cut through the room like a blade. "This court has heard sufficient evidence. Mr. Hale, your motion to remove the protective order is denied. Furthermore, due to the overwhelming documentation of harassment, endangerment, and fraud, you are hereby placed under permanent restraining order from Ms. Monroe and the child, and the district attorney will be reviewing this case for criminal charges." Silence. Pure, breathtaking silence. Avery exhaled, tears blurring her vision. Ethan reached for her hand under the table. Theo placed a steady palm on her shoulder. For the first time since the nightmare began, Avery felt something she barely recognized. Safety. Dominic was escorted out by officers, still shouting, still unraveling. His empire had collapsed, his power had cracked. His arrogance, his weapon, had become his downfall. When the courtroom emptied, Avery stood in the aisle, one hand on her belly. "It's over," she whispered. Ethan stepped in front of her, voice soft. "You did it." "No," she smiled through tears. "We did." Theo wrapped her in a careful embrace. "You survived what was meant to destroy you." They walked outside into crisp sunlight, reporters waiting, but for once, Avery didn't feel overwhelmed. Her future was hers again. Ethan reached for her hand as they stepped down the courthouse stairs. She didn't pull away, and Avery Monroe finally stepped into the life and the love she had always deserved. So, that's the end of the story. But you're still here, aren't you? And if you're still here at this moment, it means something in this journey touched your heart in a quiet, personal way. Maybe it reminded you of your own battles, maybe of the times you doubted yourself, or the moments life tried to break you but didn't succeed. Avery's story isn't just about revenge. It's about reclaiming dignity, choosing peace, and refusing to let someone else decide your worth. It's a reminder of what Marcus Aurelius wrote in Meditations. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Real strength is choosing your response. Avery didn't win because she fought louder. She won because she fought smarter, surrounded herself with people who truly cared, and learned to trust her own voice again. And maybe that's something you can carry into your own life. That healing is not weakness. That standing up for yourself is an act of self-respect. That the right people don't just support you, they help you see who you really are. If this story reached you, even just a little, then stay with us. Like this video, share it with someone who might need strength today, and don't forget to subscribe so you never walk through these stories alone.